Hello and welcome back to 209 Prep Sports Media. Chris Herrera in the studio by myself today. Scott's out to work out in Pittsburgh, so I'm going to do the rundown on my own today. Do my best to cover each and every game as quickly as possible. Again, there's a lot of games with no box score, so it becomes somewhat difficult. But we'll go ahead and get it started. Thursday night was our very first game of the week. Pacheco played Sierra. Again, not too many stats entered for this game. So the final in that game was Pacheco 16, Sierra 2. At least as far as Max Preps was, as the loading on Max Preps was. Then you go into the Friday night games. Millennium played San Juan, walked away with a 33-0 victory. It looks like a couple of guys had decent games for Millennium from a pretty run-heavy offense. You had Nate Washington, had 8 carries for 135 yards. And then you had multiple guys with double-digit rushing average with Braven Fan and Damian Muscat and obviously Nate Washington with those carries. Again, Millennium walks away with that game pretty handily at 33-0 score. As we roll into the next game, we'll cover Lathrop and Western Ranch. Looks like a very well-played, hard-fought game. The final was Lathrop ends up winning this game 14-13 box score. So we mentioned Nate Brown-Sanger last week. This week he was 2 for 11 for 20 yards passing. He was 12 for 30 rushing. Looks like their major production came from Deontay Levon. He had 7 carries for 98 yards and a touchdown. And then looks like maybe his brother, DeAndre Levon, had 14 carries for 48 yards and a touchdown. Andre Hughes had both of the catches for 20 yards. On the Lathrop side of the ball, again, pretty run heavy. Aaron Ramones had 10 carries for 87 yards and a touchdown. Estante had 7 carries for 30 yards and a touchdown. And then Noah Martinez had 12 carries for 73 yards, no touchdown. So again, very well played game. Looks like it was tough fought all the way to the end. With Lathrop prevailing 14-13. Getting into the Modesto-Hilmar game, the game I was supposed to go to, wasn't able to get out. Had a couple of things come up and wasn't able to get down there, but Hilmar put it on Modesto pretty good, prevailing 40-6. Looks like they had Cameron Moak was the starting quarterback. He was 6 for 18 for 118 yards and 3 touchdowns for a 156 QBR rating. And then Bradley Morris looked like maybe came in and relieved him or got some spot throws in there. He was 2 for 2 for 63 and a 137.5 rating. On the ground, this is a Hilmar team. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 guys got the ball. And the leading rusher was only 6 carries for 69 yards, but he had 11.5 yards per carry. That was Brock Perry. Louis Vargas had 3 for 43 and 14 yards a carry. Both Perry and Vargas had touchdowns. Receiving, looks like Derek Taylor was the leading receiver with 3 catches for 91 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Cannon Ireland had 2 catches for 32 yards and a touchdown. On the Modesto side of the ball, Eli McCabe was 8 for 20 for 217, a touchdown and a pick. The leading rusher was Henry McGrath. He was 6 for 39, no touchdown. So Hilmar winning that game pretty handily. Rolling right along, we have East Union McNair. East Union just came out guns a-blazing, kind of just put it on him from the beginning. Scored 28 in the first quarter, 21 in the second quarter, finishing with 63 points to McNair's 15. In the box score, only East Union has stats. Luke Weaver, our week 1 player of the week, was 17 for 25 for 357 and 2 touchdowns, no picks for a 137.5 quarterback rating. On the ground, Luke also had 7 carries for 83 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jonte Maggard had 6 carries for 45 yards and 2 touchdowns. Perez Jr. had 5 carries, for 33 yards and a touchdown. And then Peyton Graham also had 4 carries for 78 yards and a touchdown. So pretty well spread out. Receiving the ball, Dylan Lee had 7 catches, 173, and a touchdown. And Nicholas Luna had 3 for 70 and a touchdown. So pretty good offensive performance for East Union. I guess anytime you score 63 points, it's easy to say it was a good offensive performance. Rolling right along, getting into our game, Linden played Liberty Ranch. Pretty well fought game. Linden jumped out 17-0. Then gave up 21 unanswered before coming back and scoring a touchdown with about 6 minutes left in the game. And then defense kind of bowed up a little bit, stopped them, forced a game tying field goal attempt, which was missed wide left. The game was pretty well fought. Linden moved the ball pretty well on the ground. Joe Cowan had close to 100 yards rushing. He actually had 88 yards rushing on 15 carries and a touchdown. And then Alex Herrera was at quarterback. He was 14 for 32 and 231, a touchdown and a pick. On the Liberty Ranch side of the ball, Logan McCreary was a starting quarterback. He was 5 for 10 for 64, a touchdown and a pick. Rushing the ball, they kind of spread it out pretty good. Arthur Drager had 8 carries for 36 yards, and Kamani Fanika had 10 carries for 63 yards. Again, pretty well-fought game, tough game, with Linden coming out 24-21. Moving right along, we'll go into the Ripon Christian Calaveras game. Ripon Christian puts 49 on Calaveras, winning that game 49-34. Again, only one side of the stat box. We only have Ripon Christian stats, but Trey Fasani was 8 for 14 for 169 and 3 touchdowns for a 139.6 quarterback rating. Rushing the ball, they kind of spread it out amongst 4 guys, with Grant Sonke being the leading rusher with 16 carries, 110 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Micah DeJong was 6 for 36, 6 carries for 36 yards. Trey Fasani had 8 carries for 65 yards, and Ethan McGovern was 2 for 20. Receiving the ball, Vanderhook was 2 for 28 with 2 touchdowns, and DeJong was 3 for 82 with a touchdown. So again, pretty good win for Ripon Christian to go up to Calaveras, go up to Calaveras and have to come out with a win in Calaveras is an impressive win for a smaller school. Looks like Calaveras has been on the tough end of it for the last couple of weeks, so I'm sure that they're going to put it together. They're a perennial contender, and they just kind of figure things out. And so I'm sure that in the next couple of weeks we'll see a better Calaveras team come out. And the teams that they'll be going up against won't be easy in the MLL, but I'm sure we'll get some pretty hard-fought games. So the next game we'll cover is the Holy Bowl. So Central Catholic, St. Mary's. This game was played at St. Mary's on Friday night. You had Central Catholic came out with a win in a 41-27 game. For Central Catholic, their starting quarterback suffered a season-ending injury, unfortunately. He was 1 for 1 for 12 yards and then was taken out of the game. And then they brought in Tyler Wentworth, the big lefty. He was 7 for 14 for 82 yards, no touchdowns. Central Catholic got it done on the ground. You had Aiden Taylor was 22 for 131 and 4 touchdowns. And then you had Jalen Nichols was 9 for 38 rushing. And then they had 5 or 6 other guys get the ball. On the receiving end, pretty well balanced out. Nolan Crosdale had 3 catches, and then 4 other guys had a catch. So this game was pretty tough game. Played pretty hard, and St. Mary's was missing their starting quarterback, so they were relegated to the sophomore starter who was game. He came out, played a tough game, but not having a lot of experience under his belt. It was a tough game for him, and it's a big game for both schools, being the Holy Bowl. Everybody looks forward to playing that game. So pretty good game with Central Catholic prevailing 41-27. Moving right along, we have our friends down in Tracy. Kimball, the Kimball Jaguars took on the West Wolfpack. Kimball coming out of that game, the victor of 49-20 final score. Nick Coronado does what Nick Coronado does. He was 11 for 17 for 344, 5 touchdowns and a pick for a 132.2 quarterback rating. Rushing the ball, Sebastian Tate had 6 carries for 59 yards and a touchdown, and Dalton Anderson added 3 carries for 27 yards and a touchdown. Receiving the ball, Willie Clifton, 4 catches for 3 touchdowns, 135 yards. Mason Rivera, 5 catches for 148 and a touchdown. So there's no surprise that Kimball just wants to sling it. They get out there and chuck it quite a bit. So, I mean, they didn't throw it doesn't look like they ran a whole lot of plays unless we're missing some stats. So looks like big scores, quick scores, and with Nick Coronado hanging 5 touchdowns and passing for 344, it looks like Nick will be in the running this week for the player of the week. As we move right along into the next game, we'll go into the Oakdale Spanish Springs game. There's not stats for Oakdale, but Oakdale wins this game 48-14. It looks like they scored in every single quarter. Spanish Springs added late couple scores to get their 14. I'm sure that Oakdale had some backup players in, but not to take anything away from Spanish Springs. But that game looks like it was put away pretty early, and I'm sure Oakdale got some guys in to get some work. So the next game we'll cover is Cosumnes Oaks against Manteca. Manteca's been a kind of a juggernaut, in our section this year. They all come out of this game with it being a 46-18 winner. Manteca just kind of does it on the ground. They ran 2 different quarterbacks. James Dennis was 1 for 1 for 26 and a touchdown, and Garrison Reese was 2 for 5 for 33 yards and a touchdown. Rushing the ball, it was kind of spread out carries wise, but the bulk of the carries got to Blake Nicholson, who was 27 for 173 and a touchdown, and he also added a catch for 26 yards and a touchdown. Blake's week in and week out just kind of puts up big numbers, so Blake again will be in the running for player of the week. So far he's probably the leader in the clubhouse right now. If we were to have an early season projection of the player of the year in our area, it would probably be Blake Nicholson at the top of the list at this point. Moving on to the Escalon-Sonora game, this was going to be everybody knew this was going to be a hard-fought game. Escalon goes up the hill to Sonora. You have the sophomore Donovan Rosenvink was 10 for 17 for 131, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Rushing the ball kind of spread it out, but Logan Anderson got the bulk of the carries at 15 carries, had 112 yards. And J.P. Lyle had 11 carries for 37 yards and a touchdown. So the other touchdown was Tyler Medina. Sorry, 2 touchdowns. Tyler Medina was 1 for 11, receiving the ball for a touchdown. And the leading receiver this week was E.J. Lewis, had 3 catches for 37 yards and 1 touchdown. This was going to be one of those games that it was just going to be a defensive struggle, and it doesn't have the breakdown by quarter, but Escalon leaves Sonora with a 21-15 victory to stay undefeated this season. Moving along, we're going to go into the Tracy game, who played Franklin of Elk Grove. Tracy's quarterback was Drew Frederick. He was 4 for 10 for 106, a touchdown and a pick. The leading carrier was Austin Hoysey, had 11 carries for 113 yards and 3 touchdowns. And D. Thomas Jr. had 4 carries for 69 yards and a touchdown. Receiving, their leading receiver was Curtis Maynor, had 1 catch for 38 yards, and Mason Myers had 1 catch for 46 yards and a touchdown. So Tracy ends up winning that game 48-20. And going up to Franklin of Elk Grove and winning that game. So that's pretty impressive. When we talk about impressive, you go ahead and go to the 3-0 Houston Huskies, who went to had Argonaut visiting them this week. The final score was 37-14. Both schools have stats, so we'll run through this. Bo Davis, the quarterback at Argonaut, was 6 for 8 for 62 and a pick. Rushing the ball, they had 6 different guys get the ball. The leading carrier was Caleb McElfish, had 8 carries for 25 yards. Colby Eckhart had 7 carries for 48 yards and a touchdown, and Robert Prather had 2 carries for 80 yards and a touchdown. Receiving the ball, the leading receiver. Catch-wise was Colby Eckhart, had 3 for 12, and then Josiah Sanders had 1 for 36. On the Houston side of the ball, looks like the starting quarterback was probably Seth Harcrow. Seth was 6 for 10 for 59 yards. And then Quinteros came in and got a series or so and was 1 for 4 for 10 yards. Leading rusher this week for Houston was Will Nutcher. Will was 8 for 64 with 2 touchdowns. Seth Harcrow had 3 carries for 11 yards and 2 touchdowns. Anthony Lopez was 5 carries for 41 yards and a touchdown. All told, you had 9 different guys get the ball receiving or rushing wise. Pretty well spread out. Only with Will Nutcher getting 8 carries, everybody else getting between 2 and 5 carries. The leading receiver for Houston, is Abraham Montes was 3 for 27. And then you had Larkin Meyer had 2 catches for 19 yards. So Houston, again, they expected to be really good this year. They've stood up against all their opponents and come out victorious in every single game. So looks like there's going to be this showdown at some point with Escalon and Houston. Escalon's going to have their hands full a little bit this week. I believe they have Kimball, so they'll get to see a little bit more of a spread offense and see what they can do against one of the bigger schools that they'll face this season. Getting into the next game, Lodi, who doesn't have their stats posted, played Chavez. So I'll just go through the Chavez stats real quick. Luis Rodriguez was 13 for 22 for 109. He had a touchdown. Rushing-wise, Ruben Hooks was 27 for 93. And then Luis Rodriguez was 7 for 28. Receiving-wise, Norasith was 5 for 33. Sejan Alford was 4 for 40. And then Ruben Hooks also added 2 catches for a couple of yards there. So that was Lodi wins this game 40-6. Lodi is a very difficult team to play. They're physical. They're solid. I would have liked to have seen the stats in that game, but Lodi leaves that game victorious. Moving right along, we have Rio Americano coming down to Stag. Stag ends up losing this game 21-14. Looks like Rio Americano jumps out to an early lead 14-14. Going into the Stag adds 2 scores in the second half, converting a 2-point conversion to tie the game to push the game into overtime. Again, Rio Americano no stats, but we'll go with the Stag stats. Angel Gonzalez was 20 for 39 for 267. He had 1 touchdown but 4 interceptions. Rushing wise, you had Willie Turner had 9 carries for 20 yards, and Sir James Roots had 3 carries for 20 yards. The leading receiver was Willie Turner. He had 8 catches for 130 yards and the lone touchdown receiving. And then you added Thomas Gray had 7 catches for 83 yards. So pretty tough game. I'm not sure what Rio Americano looks like this year, but Stag's a tough team in the SJ2A. They'll expect to contend with Edison as much as anybody can contend with Edison. So it's going to be a tough season for them in a battle with Edison. Getting into the next game, we have Kennedy going to Tokay. Tokay ends up winning this game 26-18. Both teams exchanging some scores, a couple of scores in the first half. At halftime, the game's 13-12. Tokay comes out and scores another one in the third quarter and again in the fourth quarter. And Kennedy scores another in the fourth quarter for the final to be 26-18. Statistically, Brandon Moreno at quarterback was 4 for 8 for 46 yards and a touchdown. And then rushing wise, you had Barrett Crosby was 21 for 126 and 2 touchdowns. And then Xavier Moreno added 6 carries for 46 yards. Receiving, the lone touchdown came to Jason Evans, who had 2 catches for 7 yards and a touchdown. And then Isaac Delgado was the leading receiver with 2 catches for 39 yards. So again, Tokay comes away with this win 26-18. Pretty good result from Tokay against that Kennedy team. Moving on, Franklin, Yellow Jackets go down to Denair, come away with the game, winning 34-28. No box score for either team, so we won't be able to get into the stats of the game or the breakdown per quarter. But pretty good deal there for Franklin. They're on the rebuild. They're working hard over there. They're about to get their new stadium. Their new stadium's being erected as we speak, and so by next season they should be in their new home and be able to starting to turn it around on the field. So it'll be neat for them to have some success this season leading into next season. I believe if they're 2-0 for the first time in quite a while, they have a chance to go 3-0 this week. So that's congratulations to Franklin for their win this week. Ripon goes up to Sacramento and plays center. Ripon leaves this game 34-22 victorious. Ripon does have has had had a tough game earlier in the season, I believe against East Union, but to rebound, center's a good, always a good solid team. There are no stats for either team, so it's going to be a little bit difficult to break that game down, but pretty good game for Ripon. Good to see them to get back on the winning trail. As we move right along, Bear Creek went to Amador Valley. Not a good result for Bear Creek. Amador Valley puts it on them 55-0. Bear Creek didn't enter any stats into Max Prep, so I can't give you too much of a breakdown on that game. And then we get into Saturday's games. It was a much smaller slate on Saturday as opposed to the last few weekends. Really, the only game of importance for us was the Edison-Grant game. Edison goes up to Grant, who's a perennial contender at the highest level, and Edison leaves victorious 27-17. So pretty impressive for Edison. A good start, beating the Lincoln team and then now beating Grant. It's good start for them. And then to round out the week, most likely because it was Labor Day weekend, Somerville goes to Waterford. Waterford wins this game 35-28. Waterford's the only one that's entered some stats, so we'll go through those quickly. Aaron Adams was 16 for 23 for 199 and two interceptions. Rushing the ball, they had Caleb Hilton was 16 for 89 with two touchdowns, and Ryan Hilton was 22 for 121 and 3 touchdowns. So the 5 touchdowns coming from the Hilton brothers, it looks like, are possibly cousins, but I believe they're brothers. And then on the receiving side of the ball, Javier Newsom had 8 catches for 127. And Brinkman had 3 catches for 21 yards. Nobody scored touchdowns, but they slung the ball pretty well, and they spread it out to about 5 different receivers with 4 different guys getting the ball. So that's kind of that's a review of what we had this last week. Getting into tomorrow night, there's some pretty interesting games coming up this weekend. You got Calaveras and Ripon, both schools 1 and 2, but both schools coming off their first win of the year, so probably getting a little bit of confidence built up over this last week. So I expect that to be just be a well played, hard fought game. Both schools are super physical, want to get after it, so it's going to be pretty neat to see that happen. Houston goes up the hill to Somerville. Houston's taking their 3-0 record up to Somerville, who lost that game Tuesday night. Quick turnaround for Somerville, having to play Friday night after a Tuesday night game. Moving right along, you have Argonauts going to come down to Riverbank. Both schools 0-2. Both schools looking for their first win. Tracy at Pacheco. Both schools 1-1. Sonora at Hillmar. Hillmar's 3-0. Sonora 1-2. Sonora, after a tough game against Escalon this last week, doesn't get any easier against another difficult TVL team in Hillmar. That should be a very, very exciting game. I'm sure that it's going to be a lot of rushing yards, a lot of pretty good defensive plays. So that'd be a really good game to go to if anybody has time to get down to Hillmar. That's probably one of the games of the week as far as our area is concerned. As we get into some of these other games, Union Mines going to Amador. Modesto at Patterson. Kimball and Escalon, going to be a really neat game. Both schools undefeated at this point. It's probably a tale of 2 different offenses, with Escalon running a modified wing T, and Kimball they don't run the ball much at all, but they sling it quite a bit. They spread it out really well. So Mason Rivera will be a difficult matchup for some guys, as well as Willie Clifton. But on the Escalon side of the ball, they're no slouch. You're going to have Anderson running the ball, at you as hard as you can. You got the big guy EJ Lewis at tight end. going to be difficult for anybody to cover at 6'6" or so, or whatever he ends up being. And then both of their receivers, Owen Nash and Tyler Medina, both having pretty good solid seasons. So Escalon's very well balanced on offense, tough defensive team. They're going to get their toughest test of the season, obviously, with the perennial passing leader at Nick Coronado out there at Kimball. So pretty exciting game down at Escalon. Natural turf, it's grass, so it's going to be probably a little bit slower track than Kimball's used to. So it'll be interesting to see how that game plays itself out. As we move into some of these other games, you have Central. I believe that's Central coming up to Edison. Both schools 2-0, or both schools undefeated. Edison 3-0. Central's 2-0. Franklin's going to get their chance to get their third win of the year against Western Ranch. Franklin's 2-1. Western Ranch 1-2. Linden travels to Galt. Try to keep up a winning streak after Galt dropped a game to Colfax this last week. Manteca's putting their undefeated record on the line against down at Turlock, who is 0-3 going into this game. And then West at Mountain House. One of the bigger games this week looks like it will be Lincoln and Lodi. Both Lincoln's super athletic, got a ton of talent on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. Lodi's more blue collar, going to get after it, try to run it down your throat and do the best that they can. Now I could be wrong on this game because Max Preps is showing Valley at Lodi also, so I'm not exactly sure which game that is going to be. So there's a couple of different games on here. They also have Buick Colony going to Lincoln, so that looks like it's probably more accurate. It looks like Valley is going to come down to Lodi, both schools being 1-1, and then Buick and Lincoln both have a win. Lincoln got a couple games canceled back-to-back weeks, so Buick will come down into Stockton and do their best to try to tame Lincoln's difficult offense with all their athletes and stars. So Sac High coming down to McNair. Sac High is 2-0, playing the 0-2 McNair Eagles. Franklin of Elk Grove coming down to Bear Creek. Both teams looking for their first win. Sierra at Stagg, again, both teams looking for their first win. Bear River comes down to Liberty Ranch. Chavez goes to Wood. Archbishop Mitty at Oakdale. That should be a really good game. Oakdale's undefeated at this point. Archbishop Mitty, I'm sure, has played a tough schedule, so it'll be a good test for Oakdale against a talented team. And that's it for the Friday night games. Fortunately, looks like the weather is going to be good. We're good with the air quality. Moving into Saturday, you have St. Mary's is going over to San Francisco to play St. Ignatius and Denair at Washington. So as we move on, we're now into week 3. Everybody's getting closer to the end of their preseason games, getting ready for league. I'm sure that everybody's getting excited about stepping up into their league and conference schedules. It's been it's been a pretty good for everybody as far as the COVID situations that have been. Everybody is monitoring them well and getting through their games. I know, on a weekly basis, some of the starting quarterbacks or receivers or running backs or linemen are missing because of COVID contact tracing or what have you. Some of the schools missed some games in the last couple of weeks due to air quality. But I think at the end of the day, it's pretty neat that we're getting as many of these games in, and there's everybody working in concert together to make sure that these kids are able to play, able to play at a level that they are accustomed to. It's not, there hasn't been a big drop off in things. I know that officials have been, it's been difficult to get officials to a lot of these games because of when games are moved, they're already scheduled for other games or youth games or what have you. And so, just the amount of officials has been somewhat difficult. There's been a lot of schools working together to make sure that the games happen. So I know St. Mary's gave up a home game to De La Salle. I know that Calaveras gave up their home game and came down to Escalon. So there's been a lot of that happening. And so that's good that we're recognizing that this is more about the kids and not really about, making sure we get a home game or the gate or whatever it may be. That the priority has been about the kids and making sure that they get the things that they need to do. I would encourage, all of you guys that do listen or have some interest in what's going on, to reach out to your coaches and make sure that they're getting, the stats input for you, not just for us. I mean, there's a lot of things statistically that you have college coaches that'll look for. They're not necessarily looking for the gaudy numbers, but I mean, if you're putting up some pretty decent sized numbers, I can promise you that they're going to have a better reason to look at your film and give you an opportunity to be recruited. So as we move along, let's go ahead and just cover who the stat leaders are this week. I mean, after our week 3, so Luke Weaver is the leading passer in the section. You have Luke's got 811 yards passing. He's 49 of 76 for 645 and through 3 games played with a 106 quarterback rating. Nick Coronado's only played 2 games, but Nick's put up 700 yards, which is a 353 average. He's 35 for 47, 8 touchdowns, 3 picks, with a 129 quarterback rating. And then the next highest quarterback rated is Alex Herrera. He's played 3 games. He's got 534 yards passing for a 178 average in 3 games. He's completed about 50% of his passes. And then Angel Gonzalez has thrown for 489 yards in 2 games for a 244 average. And finally, this sophomore, Donovan Rosevink, has had a really good year so far. He's in a really good system as far as being a young quarterback that doesn't put a whole lot of pressure on him. So he just is really called upon to make good decisions, and so far he's done a great job of that. He's 29 for 44 for 468 yards passing, 8 touchdowns and a pick for a 131.4 quarterback rating over 3 games. So that's pretty impressive for again, a sophomore. He's well coached down there in Escalon. They do a good job making sure that they're not asking him to do too much, but at the same time, exploiting his talents and making sure that people can see how good the kid can be. It's really difficult, again, to go through all these stats because I know there's so many teams that aren't putting in any stats. So I know that there's a lot of kids that are missing from this, and it's difficult to cover 50 or 60 games on a Friday night when we don't have a staff of 50 or 60 people to go watch games. On the rushing side of the ball, Blake Nicholson's the leading rusher. No surprise to anybody. Blake's got 478 yards rushing through 3 games played for a 10 yards per carry average and 6 touchdowns. The next leading rusher in our area is going to be Will Nutcher. Will's played 3 games, 352 yards rushing for a 117 average and 8 touchdowns. Logan Anderson also 343 through 3 games, 114 average, 2 touchdowns. Ryan Hilton has 333 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns. I'm sorry. And then Aiden Lopes rounds it out. He's got 300 yard rushing and across 2 games for a 150 per game average, 3 touchdowns. So it's pretty impressive little list through the 3 games. Some people only getting their first 2 in. So it'll be interesting to see as the season evolves if these kids stay in those areas. The leading receiver in our area is Javier Newsom. Through 3 games, Javier has 320 yards receiving, up for 106.7 yards per game and 2 touchdowns. Jordan Sherman has 17 catches for 317 yards for a 19 per catch average and 1 touchdown. Jaden Vargas has 306 yards receiving on 13 receptions with 3 touchdowns. Mason Rivera, who's Nick Coronado's favorite target, has 3 touchdowns, 304 yards receiving for a 152-yard average. Dylan Lee has 291 yards receiving on 15 catches, 2 touchdowns. Javier Huizar has 279 on 15 catches and 4 touchdowns. And Roy Gardner has 15 catches for 270 and 2 touchdowns. And then finally we have Owen Nash with 2 touchdowns on 14 receptions and 264 yards. So those are the leaders. The leading leader amongst the whole section in touchdowns would be Blake Nicholson, who after this week we're going to give Blake will be our player of the week this week. Again, I think it's well deserved. It's one of those things that I think at the end of the day, Blake's played it pretty tough. I believe that's back-to-back weeks if I'm remembering right. But he has 9 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns rushing and 3 receiving. Will Nutcher has 8 touchdowns and 1 receiving. And then the next closest would be Luke Weaver. He has 7 touchdowns rushing, so pretty good for a quarterback. Also, Caleb Hilton has 7 touchdowns, and then the final person in our section would be Dwayne Thomas Jr. has 5 touchdowns, as well as Derek Taylor has 5 touchdowns, and Barrett Crosby also has 5 touchdowns. So that's just rounding out the list for this week. We have a lot of games on the slate this week. Looking forward to the results and seeing how things go this weekend. I'll be able to go to our game this week, and then obviously I'll get to go to St. Mary's on Saturday. Next week we'll be able to get a few games in because we have a bye next week. So please, if you guys can, make sure you got your team, your coaches, somebody to enter stats. It helps us out. I'm sure there's the local print media would like to see these stats too. It's difficult for them to be at every single game, so they're getting secondhand info and that type of stuff. So it's difficult to get a good true indicator of and how the game went and who scored and all that type of stuff. And really, that's what we're all about. We're trying to promote high school football in our area and give these kids an opportunity to have a little bit of glory for all the hard work that they're putting in on a week in and week out basis. So looking forward to seeing how this week goes. And we'll be back on next week, with a little bit more info. Like I said, hopefully we can get some more statistics, so it'll be a little bit more in-depth coverage. But good luck, everybody, this week, and have a great week. Thanks. Bye.